Well, good morning, and thank you all for coming. My name is Dr. O.D.Tenpenny, and I want to welcome you to the presentation that we're going to do this morning called Vaccines, the Benefits, the Risks, and the Choices. Now, we all know that vaccines have been touted to be the most important medical discovery that's ever happened to our planet and to our medical industry for the last couple hundred years. And some of the things that we're going to talk about this morning are you're probably going to find to be not only different from that paradigm, but disquieting and even a little bit upsetting at times, because these are things not normally talked about in the medical world. In fact, I would venture to say that a lot of physicians don't even know this information. I've spent the last 3 or 4 years investigating this on my own, and I stopped counting, literally counting the hours of time that I've put into this investigation at about 5,000 hours, and I think I've probably gone about 1,000 hours since then, because I do dedicate somewhere between 2 to 4 hours a day, almost every day of the week, to investigating this very moving target because of all the things that are constantly happening inside the vaccine industry. Not only the changes of the individual vaccines, but the things that are happening in the bioterrorism world now, things that are happening in politics, things that are happening in new discoveries. So there's an awful lot of things to know about. What we're going to be focusing on today and spending the better part of about 2.5 hours discussing are all the individual pediatric vaccines. After we go through those, we're going to talk about the meningitis vaccine that has to do with the college-age kids. We're going to talk about RSV and what that vaccine is to newborns. We're going to talk a little bit more about what's planned for newborn vaccination here over the next couple of years. And then we'll conclude at the end talking about travel vaccines. There will be some information in here about exemptions. There'll be some information about what you can do politically to get involved with this. So we've got a whole lot of things to cover. And without further ado, we'll just go ahead and say, this is what the CDC and what the conventional medical world has to say about vaccines. That they say that vaccines are among the nation's most important public health tools. They save lives and money, protect people, particularly infants and young children, from unnecessary suffering caused by vaccine-preventable diseases, and improve the quality of life for infants, children, adolescents, and adults. Since the introduction of safe and effective vaccines, the United States and most developed countries have experienced at least a 97% reduction in the number of cases of vaccine-preventable diseases of childhood compared to pre-vaccine era levels. Reported cases of vaccine-preventable diseases in children are currently at record low levels. However, these diseases can readily return if immunization levels decline as a result of complacency or other factors. Now, we're going to go through in a good portion of this video and refute a lot of those statements. There's another video that's available that I've done. It's called about the CDC's information. It's called What the CDC and Science Documents Reveal. And it will go through much more specific reasons about the safety and efficacy issues. This one today we're going to focus on what's happening with the individual vaccines. Now, one of the things that you'll notice as we go through this entire presentation is these documentations down here at the bottom, where it says cdc.gov. All of those are CDC website documents. When I first got involved in this information, I decided that, gosh, there were an awful lot of people saying that vaccines weren't good for you and they were causing harm and they were causing an awful lot of problems. Maybe the place to start this investigation would go to the CDC's website and look at all the things that the CDC says as to why vaccines are good, why they protect you, why there are all those things in that first introductory statement that I just read. Well, the CDC, being the Center for Disease Control, they're the ones who are the make the rules and make the laws and to pass the legislation and make the approval to the committees to pass the vaccines and put them into the pediatric schedule. It's sort of like if you were an attorney and you wanted to investigate some sort of issue, you would probably go to the U.S. Supreme Court. You would want to go to the highest law in the land and look and see what those case things were. Well, I wanted to go to the highest law in the land in terms of the vaccine world, and so I went to the CDC's website and started reading all of their materials. And once I started reading their materials, I realized that there were a lot of discrepancies and an awful lot of things that nobody really thinks about. And that's where a lot of this material comes from. The other part of the material comes from conventional medical journals such as the Pediatric Infectious Disease Journal, JAMA, which is the Journal for American Medical Society. Those types of journals have supporting documentation. The Journal of Autoimmunity, the Journal of Immunology, when we start talking about autoimmune issues. So all of this material is available to the conventional medical world and conventional medical doctors. It's just kind of what we call hidden in plain sight. Nobody's really reading it, and so therefore it's claimed that it's not there. So this is the thing that ends up happening when you start questioning vaccination and start questioning whether or not this is a good thing for you and your family. These are the sorts of statements that get read. That anti-vaccine consumers, as soon as you start questioning, you start getting labeled as an anti-something. So we're being labeled as anti-vaccine. So anti-vaccine consumers tend to be those with a child who had a bad reaction, which of course could have been a coincidence. Those who believe the government should not tell them what to do, which I believe in a free society, there's some truth to that one. And those who are increasingly focused on perceived benefits of alternative medicine. Well, for those of us who know the actual benefits of alternative medicine, we say that there's something more than just a perception. So these are some statements this has been around for a long time. This was a quote that I got out of Family Practice News way back in 1999, but it doesn't change much. That we are considered to be anti-vaccine consumers because of all these coincidences and that there is no proof, when we're going to show you that there is quite a bit of proof. So we have a very large public health policy here. The vaccine industry in this country alone is somewhere between $7 and $10 billion a year. So because we do this, and it's part of our public health policy, part of our school policy, there has to be some basic assumptions upon which that is built. Well, after ferreting down all this information and sort of sifting through it, I've come up with at least 4 reasons why we have this policy. One is that we believe that vaccines are responsible for the decline of infectious diseases. We believe that they are solely responsible, and that is the cornerstone of what this is all about. That if we were able to vaccinate away smallpox and soon to be polio, then we can vaccinate away just about any other type of infectious disease on the planet. Vaccines are believed to be safe and relatively harmless. Well, there are a whole lot of safety and harm issues that need to be discussed. We don't go into that very much in depth in this particular presentation, but the other video spends a lot of time talking about that. That vaccines are effective and the effects are long-lasting. Well, it all depends on how you define effective. Most parents and physicians would define effective to mean that it protects you. From a scientific perspective, what research shows is that what effective means when you're doing a vaccine study means I inject something in you and it effectively causes the development of an antibody. Does that antibody necessarily protect you? There's a lot of discussion about whether or not that's an absolute truth. And that vaccines are the only way to prevent epidemics of these dangerous diseases. I mean, really dangerous things like mumps and chickenpox, We've got some really bad things. Now, that's not to say that there aren't some dangerous diseases out there, and that's not to minimize the effect of that some of these illnesses can cause some serious problems. But the overall, when you stand back and put it in perspective of what everything is about, that's what we're here to talk about today. So we're going to start with some definitions because words have power and words have meaning, and I think that if you use the right words with this, you'll begin to get a different perspective of what this is all about. For one thing, we're going to talk about the definition between vaccination and immunization because they're not synonyms. What vaccination means, it's the physical act of giving a shot. And what immunization means, it's the process that happens inside of your physiology to try to induce an artificial immunity. So when you say, I'm going to take my kids to the doctor and get them immunized, you're really not. All you're really doing is taking them to the doctor to get them vaccinated. You're taking them over there to get them a shot. Whether or not they develop an immunity remains to be seen. And even the CDC says that although persons use vaccination and immunization interchangeably, the terms are not synonyms. The administration of a shot or a vaccine cannot automatically be equated with the development of immunity. Well, that's their own material. I mean, that's a direct quote that comes from this MMWR. And whenever you see MMWR, that stands for Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report, just put that into your brain that that's a government document. So whenever you see MMWR in any of these references or any of these footnotes, that means that is a quote or that is a reference that came directly from the government document, the CDC documents. And please feel free, all of these slides are documented so that you can go and do your own investigation and look these things up yourself.